You're looking for a storage solution that won't turn your home office or small studio into a tech headache, something reliable, easy to live with, and that actually justifies the price tag, not just a laundry list of specs. I get that hesitation. You've probably spent a few evenings scrolling through endless NAS options, worrying about whether you'll end up with a box that sits idle because it's too complex, or worse, a device that slows down when you finally need it most. That's why I dug into how an all-flash NAS like the Asustor DiscTech 12TB bundle behaves in real life before I hit record. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, the DiscTech isn't just a chassis you fill yourself. It arrives pre-populated with 6 2TB NVMe M.2 SSDs, 8 GB of RAM, and dual 2.5 GB ports. For most people, the appeal of plug-and-play is that you can get a high-performance server up and running without hunting down compatible drives or worrying about firmware quirks. In practice, that translates to a straightforward power on, network connect, and you're ready to start migrating files. The initial setup wizard walks you through RAID configuration, user permissions, and basic services, and you can finish the whole thing in under 10 minutes if your network is already set up for 2.5 GB. Now, who actually benefits from that kind of setup? If you're a photographer or videographer who constantly moves multi-gigabyte RAW files between a laptop and a backup location, the all-flash design gives you transfer speeds that rival a direct-attached SSD. I've seen people report read/write rates north of 1 GB per second when the NAS is on a 2.5 GB network, which means a 100 GB project can be copied in under a minute, practically instantaneous for a home studio. That speed also shines when you're streaming 4K video to multiple devices. The NAS can handle several concurrent streams without the typical buffering you'd get from a spinning disk unit. Another practical use case is as a personal cloud for a small team. With the built-in RAID support, RAID 5, 6, or 10 depending on how much redundancy you want, you get both capacity and fault tolerance. 6 2TB drives give you 12 TB of usable space after RAID 5, leaving room for a few hot backups while still protecting against a single drive failure. Because the drives are NVMe, rebuild times are dramatically shorter than with traditional SATA disks. If a drive does fail, the array can rebuild in a matter of hours rather than days, reducing the window where you're vulnerable to a second failure. But there are trade-offs that matter once the initial excitement wears off. First, the all-flash approach, while lightning fast, is still pricier per terabyte than a mixed HDD SSD solution. If your primary need is archival storage, think long-term backups of documents or low-frequency media, the cost per gigabyte might feel steep. In that scenario, a traditional NAS with a few large HDDs could deliver the same capacity for a fraction of the price, albeit with slower access times. So the DiscTech really shines when speed is a non-negotiable part of your workflow. Second, the dual 2.5 GB ports are a solid upgrade over the standard 1 GB you see on most consumer NAS units, but they still require a compatible switch or router to unlock their full potential. If you're still on a basic home router that only supports 1 GB, you won't see the speed advantage. The NAS will simply fall back to the lower rate. That means you need to factor in an additional network upgrade if you want to harvest the performance promised by the hardware. Thermal management is another subtle point. 6 NVMe modules generate noticeable heat, and the DiscTech relies on a passive cooling design with a large heatsink and a single intake fan. In a well-ventilated office or studio, it stays cool, but in cramped or poorly ventilated enclosures, you might notice the unit's fan ramping up under sustained load. It's not a failure mode, but the fan noise can become audible if you're recording audio nearby. For most home environments, it's manageable, but it's something to keep in mind if you're sensitive to background hum. Software-wise, Asustor's ADM, Asustor Data Master OS is fairly intuitive once you get past the initial wizard. The app ecosystem includes everything from Plex Media Server to Docker containers, which lets power users spin up extra services without buying a separate server. The downside is that the interface can feel a bit cluttered when you enable many apps, and some advanced settings are buried under multiple menus. If you're the type who prefers a minimalistic UI, you might need to spend a bit of time customizing the dashboard to keep it from feeling overwhelming. Let's talk about reliability. The bundle has amassed a 4.5-star rating from over 1,000 reviewers, which suggests that most owners have a positive experience. While I don't have detailed breakdowns of the negative comments, The general consensus on similar all-flash NAS models points to a few recurring themes. Occasional firmware hiccups that require a reboot, and the need for regular firmware updates to keep compatibility with newer,